Somewhere in your house, there is a drawer or a closet that has become a kind of confession, a flashlight with dead batteries, a first aid kit still wrapped in plastic, maybe a case of water bottles you bought during some scare a few years ago and never touched again. If you have something like that, you already know the feeling I'm talking about. It's not fear, exactly. It's more like a quiet suspicion that if something actually happened, you would not be ready. And you're not alone in that feeling. Most people carry it around for years without ever doing anything about it. Here's what's strange, though. The people who do try to fix that feeling often end up more anxious than before they started. They watch a few videos, they read a few forum posts, and suddenly the goal isn't be ready for a rough week. The goal becomes something much bigger. Bunkers, years of stored food, bags packed for total collapse. And somewhere in that process, being prepared quietly turns into a full identity, one that feels extreme, a little embarrassing, and honestly, exhausting. So most people do the only thing that feels reasonable. They close the tab, they put it off, and the drawer stays exactly the way it is. But here's the question almost nobody asks. What are you actually supposed to be ready for? Because when you look at the data on what really disrupts American households, it's not the end of the world. It's something far more common and far shorter. It's a storm that knocks out your power for a couple of days. It's a hurricane that floods a few streets over. It's an ice storm that shuts down your town for a weekend. According to data from the U.S. Energy Information Administration, the average American household experienced around 8 hours of total power interruption in 2023. That's the highest number recorded in over a decade. Not because the grid is falling apart in some dramatic way, but because severe weather is becoming more frequent, and older infrastructure is feeling the strain. 8 hours doesn't sound like much on its own, but that's an average, spread across the whole country, including places that rarely lose power at all. In areas that get hit hard by storms, outages can stretch far longer than a few hours. And once you start looking at how many parts of the country have actually been touched by a major disaster in the last decade or so, the picture gets even bigger. An analysis of federal disaster records found that between 2011 and 2024, 99.5% of congressional districts in the United States experienced at least one federally declared major weather disaster. Read that again. Not one region, not one type of climate, almost everywhere. So if nearly everyone is exposed to this in some way, why doesn't it feel real until it happens to us directly? Part of the answer is that we picture disaster completely wrong. We imagine cinematic destruction, something loud and total. What actually happens is quieter. The lights go out. Your phone shows no signal. The store down the street closes because they can't run their registers. Nobody is fighting for survival. They're just sitting in the dark, waiting, and slowly realizing how much of daily life depends on things they never think about. It's also worth saying plainly that this exposure isn't spread evenly. A household in a dry inland state faces a different set of risks than one on a hurricane coastline, or one in a mountain town prone to flash flooding. The type of disruption changes depending on where you live. What doesn't change nearly as much is the basic shape of the experience. Somewhere, at some point, the systems you rely on every day stop working for a while. The cause is local. The feeling of being cut off from everything you're used to is not. Communication is where this becomes especially clear. Most of us assume our phones will work no matter what. That assumption held up fine for years, until Hurricane Helene hit the southeastern United States in 2024. According to FCC data, Helene knocked out more cell towers than any hurricane on record. In some of the hardest hit counties in North Carolina, more than 70% of cell sites went offline. Not spotty service, not slow loading. Offline. People couldn't call family members to say they were safe. Emergency crews had to work with radios and paper maps instead of the tools they normally rely on. This wasn't a rare freak event tucked away in history. It happened recently, and it happened at a scale nobody had seen before. That's the moment the illusion breaks. We treat modern infrastructure like it's guaranteed. Power, cell service, running water, they feel less like utilities and more like laws of nature. The kind of thing that simply exists in the background of our lives. But none of it is guaranteed. It's built, maintained, and delivered by systems that can be overwhelmed. And when they are, the disruption tends to last for days, not months. Which brings us back to the real question underneath all of this. If the actual danger is a rough week or two, why does everyone assume preparedness means something so much bigger? Here's where a second, quieter misunderstanding comes in. A lot of people believe that once you start preparing, it has to be all or nothing. Either you do the full plan, the stockpile, the bunker mentality, or you don't bother at all. But that's not how emergency agencies actually frame it. Federal guidance from FEMA and the American Red Cross has consistently pointed to something much smaller. Enough water and food to get through 3 days if you have to evacuate, and up to 2 weeks if you're sheltering at home. That's the actual standard. Not indefinite self-sufficiency. A 2-week bridge to get you through the period before things return to normal. 2 weeks is a completely different mental exercise than prepare for anything. 2 weeks is something you can picture. You can imagine what your family eats in 14 days. You can imagine how much water that actually takes. It stops being an abstract fear and starts being a solvable problem, one with an actual finish line. And once you frame it that way, the next misunderstanding becomes obvious too. Most people think preparing means buying things, lots of things. Kits, gear, supplies that promise to cover every possible scenario. But buying things and being ready are not the same activity. A prepackaged kit sitting untouched in a closet doesn't help anyone if nobody knows how to use what's inside, or if the food in it is something your family has never eaten and won't want to eat under stress. Preparedness isn't a purchase. It's a plan that fits the life you already live. There's a particular trap that catches almost everyone who tries to fix this feeling on their own. It usually starts the same way. A few videos, a few articles, a growing sense of urgency, and then a purchase that feels productive simply because it's a purchase. The problem is that feeling productive and being prepared are not the same thing. A tool that fails the moment you actually need it is arguably worse than having no tool at all, because it hands you false confidence right up until the moment that confidence matters most. Think about water for a second, because it's the simplest example of how misunderstood this whole topic is. Long-standing guidance from the Red Cross recommends 1 gallon of water per person, per day. That covers drinking, cooking, and basic hygiene. For a family of 4, planning for 2 weeks at home, that adds up to more water than most people would ever guess just by thinking about it casually. It sounds like a lot until you realize it can sit quietly in a corner of a garage in a few containers, taking up almost no daily attention. The barrier was never really about space or cost. It was about nobody explaining the actual number, so people either overbuy in a panic or never start at all. Food follows a similar pattern, just with a different trap. Instead of underestimating, people overcorrect. They see large containers advertised as a year of survival food, and it feels like the responsible, thorough choice. But there's a detail that gets buried underneath the marketing. Emergency situations are exactly when routines are already stressed, exactly when unfamiliar things feel harder to manage. Food that a family has never eaten before, prepared in ways they're not used to, adds friction at the worst possible time. Simpler guidance points towards something almost boring by comparison. Foods your family already eats regularly, just a bit more of them, rotated naturally through everyday shopping. Now here's where the deeper cost of not preparing starts to show up, and it's not really about supplies at all. It's about what happens to a household when a disruption stretches beyond a day or two. Somewhere around that point, people find out how much of their sense of control depended on things simply working. No power means no easy way to know what's happening outside your own street. No cell service means no way to check on the people you love. This is where the emotional weight of these events actually lives, in that gap of not knowing, made worse by not having thought through it beforehand. There's a detail from the research that rarely gets mentioned, but it matters. During major regional disasters, local phone networks often get overloaded because everyone nearby is trying to make calls at the same time. But calls placed to someone in a different state often go through more easily because they're not competing for the same local network. Emergency planners have quietly recommended for years that families pick one out-of-state contact, someone everyone can reach out to if local lines get jammed. It costs nothing. It takes 5 minutes to set up. And almost nobody does it, simply because nobody ever explained why it works. That pattern shows up again and again throughout this whole topic. The most useful pieces of preparedness are rarely expensive. They're just unfamiliar. A battery-powered weather radio that still works when the power and internet don't. A waterproof folder holding copies of your most important documents, so an evacuation doesn't turn into a scramble through filing cabinets while the clock is running out. A small amount of cash at home, because when the power goes out, card readers and ATMs go down right along with it. None of these cost much. None of them require a bunker mentality. They require knowing they matter, which is exactly the piece most people are missing. And there's a financial layer to all of this too, one that connects to something far more common than any storm. According to the Federal Reserve's most recent survey on household finances, roughly 3 out of 10 American adults could not cover a $500 emergency expense using their savings alone. That's not a hurricane. That's a car repair, or a medical bill, showing up on an ordinary Tuesday. Preparedness, in the fullest sense, isn't only about weather. It's about having a buffer, physical or financial, between you and a bad surprise. The two aren't as separate as they might seem. Both come down to the same basic question. If something disrupted your normal routine for 2 weeks, what would actually happen to your family? There's one more piece of this that almost never gets mentioned, and it has nothing to do with food or water at all. It's paperwork. If a wildfire or a flood forces you out of your home with 20 minutes of notice, the thing that causes the most stress afterward usually isn't the supplies you left behind. It's the documents. Passports, insurance papers, medical records, the things that take weeks of phone calls and frustration to replace if they're lost. A simple waterproof folder with copies of everything important, kept somewhere you can grab quickly, solves a problem most people never even realize they have until they're standing in a driveway wondering what to bring. Once you sit with that question honestly, the whole topic stops feeling like an extreme hobby reserved for a certain type of person. It starts feeling like ordinary responsibility, the same category as having insurance or knowing basic first aid. Nobody assumes those things make you paranoid. They're just part of taking care of the people who depend on you. So maybe the real shift isn't buying more or building some elaborate plan for a scenario that almost never happens. Maybe it's simply asking a smaller, more honest question. Not, am I ready for anything? But, am I ready for 2 weeks? Water, food you'd actually eat, a way to see and communicate if the power goes out, your documents somewhere you can grab quickly, and a little bit of cash tucked away. That's not a bunker. That's a household that has thought ahead, just enough to turn a bad situation into a manageable one. The families who come through a rough week, the easiest are rarely the ones with the most gear. They're the ones who already knew what to do before they needed to know it. If you'd like to explore some helpful resources on where to start, you'll find them in the description.